What can you do with $9 store Rubik's Cubes? Well, you could stack them up into a big tower and see how high you can get until they all fall over. Or you could build a 3x3 grid out of 3x3s and then make a pretty mosaic pattern like this. Ta-da! Or you could break out the stack mat timer, scramble the cubes up, and then try and do the fastest possible 9-cube relay. And woohoo, sub 9! But I think if I'm honest, the best thing to do with a bunch of awful turning Rubik's Cubes is to make an awesome mod out of them. Now there's all sorts of cool mods that you can make with 1 or 2 3x3s. The first thing that comes to mind is the fused cubes, where you basically glue 2 3x3s together by their core. So what if we just made a massive chain of fused cubes? This cube fused to this one, and on and on and on. It would look absolutely awesome. But the problem is, each time you fuse 2 cubes together, we're effectively restricting the movement of 3 sides of each puzzle. And so you can imagine if we fused another cube on right here, we would be restricting all 6 sides of this middle puzzle, and it wouldn't be able to turn at all. Fortunately, there are some less restrictive ways to attach a bunch of cubes together. One of those is the Siamese cubes. If we were to make a big chain of 9 connected Siamese cubes, each cube along the way would still be able to turn. However, it would still be pretty restrictive, and you definitely wouldn't be able to solve that cube normally. So how could we attach cubes together like this while still allowing each one to be fully functional? Well, you could just glue one corner piece to another corner piece, kind of like this. Both cubes would still be fully functional, and you could expand this out with as many cubes as you want. The only problem is, it doesn't look very nice or symmetrical to just have the 2 corners glued together like this. We almost would want them to be sort of nestled together, kind of more like the fused 2x2s. So basically what we need is a piece that can connect the 2 cubes together, kind of like this. So it needs to only take up as much room as a normal corner piece, but it needs to have the mechanism for 2 cubes, 1 on each end. So what I'm gonna do is use a Dremel to cut both corners in half, then take a knife to clean up all the extra little bits of plastic, and finally use some super glue to glue those 2 halves back together. And here we have it. The Frankenstein double-headed corner piece is complete. So now it's time to stick each end into each puzzle, and here is what the result looks like. So not only was that pretty easy to do, but it also looks really nice. And best of all, we have made fused cubes where each cube is still its own fully functional 3x3. So you know what that means. We can now scale this out in the same style as the mass-produced quad fused 2x2s, except there's no limit of 4. So if we want to fuse all 9 cubes together, we're going to need a total of 8 of these little interconnecting corner pieces, which means we need to make 7 more. So let's go ahead and start popping these corners out, and then we can make all 7 of them at once. Ta-da! I call it the 3x3x3x9. And yes, I know 2 of them have the wrong color scheme. They're dollar store cubes, don't worry about it. And while I'm not going to completely scramble this up and solve it, I've already gone through the pain of solving all these mini cubes once in this video, I will at least do some turns on it to show you some of the cool and crazy shapes these things can end up in. Now, as you can imagine, even though each of these cubes is technically fully functional, it would be very unwieldy to actually try and solve them, because every time you do a turn, all the other cubes around it are just going to start going crazy, flying everywhere, and sometimes even running into each other. So while it might not technically be any more difficult to solve this thing compared to a normal cube, it might take some creative hand positioning at the very least. Even just to try and scramble it honestly seems like a bit of a nightmare to me, which is why I am not doing it. I will show you a checkerboard pattern though. Other than the blue and green, I think these dollar store cubes somehow managed to find the ugliest combinations of shades possible. Gross. Now, as interesting as this concept is, I will say that it's certainly not the most practical way to arrange a bunch of 3x3s together. Just the fact that they're all on one big line makes it really floppy, especially with how cheap these cubes are. So I want to find some sort of configuration of these that's a little bit more stable. Kind of like what I did with turning the quad fused 2x2x3s into one big donut. The cool thing is, we can always just take these cubes apart and rearrange those Frankenstein corner pieces to make these cubes fuse together into whatever pattern we want. In fact, I think I have a pretty good idea of how we can make it into one big circle. So let's just go ahead and try it out and see what happens. Well, it sure took some trial and error, but I eventually realized that the puzzle I was trying to make all along only involves 6 cubes. In my opinion, this one looks way cooler than the first configuration did. It still feels a little bit flimsy, but the fact that everything is interconnected into one big circle gives me a lot more confidence while holding it. It does of course have some downsides though, namely that the puzzles are no longer fully functional. You can turn these top 2 layers freely on each of them, but besides that, all you can really do is turn the middle layers, like this, which doesn't give you a whole lot of options. Fortunately though, that means you can still do an ugly checkerboard pattern. Seriously, whose idea was it to arrange the colors like this? The solving might be a little bit of an extra challenge, but it would get very tedious very quickly trying to do end moves on all these little mini cubes that just lock up like crazy. And of course, the other downside of everything being rigidly held together like this is that there's no wacky shape shifting, no cubes flying around as you're trying to solve another cube. So what if we could use all 9 of these cubes to create a cool looking concept that holds itself together reasonably well, turns decently, and where every cube is fully functional? Well, I think I have an idea that's so crazy that it just might work. And here is the result. Basically what it is a single 3x3 at the center with all of its corners removed and replaced, each one with its own 3x3. So believe it or not, the cube at the center is still fully functional. You can turn it like this just by moving around the outer layer cubes. You do have to be a little bit careful with alignment, kind of reach your finger down there and make sure the middle layer is where you want it. It's certainly a little unwieldy, but not as bad as you might think. And as you're solving that inner cube, you can actually look at the colors on the outer cubes to know if you're putting the corners in the right place. So I think that little gimmick makes this mod the most fun to solve. There's a little bit of strategy to solving the outer cubes before the inner one, so you know which corner goes where. And of course, all 8 outer cubes are also fully functional. It might not look like it, but there is actually plenty of clearance between the cubes, and so you can turn all 6 sides. I just really like this design because it's so compact. Being able to fit all 9 cubes into such a small space and having the central attachment point at the middle makes everything relatively stable. Here's your standard fare ugly checkerboard. Even the middle one's got it. And this was probably the easiest mod to do this on because there was no crazy shapeshifting or annoying bandaging to get in the way. If I were to make any changes, I might actually remove all the stickers from the center cube and then bandage it up to make it act more like a 2x2. That way you don't have any of those alignment issues anymore. And then the cool thing would be you'd have to solve all 8 outer cubes first, and then the final challenge would reveal itself of solving the big 2x2 with its pieces being made up of the 8 cubes you just solved. So maybe let me know down in the comments, which one do you like better, the way it is now or the final challenge 2x2 version? I'd be happy to change it up to whatever. But anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video messing around and modding these little mini cubes. They are really cheap and easy to get your hands on, and there are endless possibilities for mods you can make. Let me know if you thought of any other cool ideas, but that's pretty much it, and I'll see you guys next time.